What's going on? How you doing? My name's David the Crook, and today I'm going to show you the best way to set up your plugins when it comes down to mixing vocals. But before we get into the video, I want to remind you to subscribe and drop a like. I have a song here. It is called Quarantine Freestyle by the Official Izzy. I'll put the link down below in the description so you can check out the full song. I'm going to play it and then we'll get into it.
Check. Hey. Yeah. Turn me up real quick, bro. Check. Yeah. Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' bout my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast. I keep my mouth silent, don't really like to boast. If you see me, then you see me. I've been posted on them roads, bout my chicken and bout Fetty. Sauce down just like spaghetti. Try and catch me lacking on my gang, I'm gon' be ready. Watch me beat the brakes off them, take his changes cause I'm petty. I'm in your girl's dreams, but your nightmares like I'm Freddy Krueger, big boss, yeah, this drip costs a lot, baby. Change something light, but you know that this watch crazy. No shame,
That's a song right there. Like I said, I'll put the link down below in the description. I get this question asked a lot, and it's why I set up my plugins the way I set them up. Like, for example, I always throw the auto-tune semi-last instead of first, like most people. I always do specific things that might not be very traditional compared to other people, but I found that the way I mix works best for me, and that's what I want to talk to you about. Whether it's best to compress before EQing, whether it's best to EQ before compressing, or putting one plugin before the other plugin, or if it even matters whether you bust your reverb or throw the reverb onto the vocals. It's all subjective. It all honestly depends on you and what works best for you. So I'm gonna show you the way I do it, and then I hope the way I set up my vocal chain you could implement it when it comes down to the way you mix. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know I like building my vocal chain from scratch, and that's just because I like treating each song unique. I might use the same order of the plugins to mix a song, but the amount of compression and the amount of EQing and stuff like that, it's all subjective depending on the person's voice. For example, someone's voice might be hella deep, some people's voice might be like nasally, some people might have like a squeaky voice, you know, you might be recording like a younger kid or older person. It all depends on the person's voice, the tone, and then the way they rap or sing or whatever they're going to be doing on the song. So when it comes down to the actual mixing, one of the first things I like doing when it comes to mixing just vocals in general is I like leveling the vocals. And if you're not going to use a plugin like Outlaw or Waves Vocal Writer, or specifically go into the DAW and automate the vocals, because you might want to use like some sort of compressor, I like using Outlaw. This is more of a automation. It's gonna ride like the fader, it's gonna ride the gain and pretty much level the vocals so it all stays consistent. If I were to play the vocals dry, it sounds like this.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close.
And then if I were to put the automation on, it sounds like this.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' bout my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast.
So for example, something, I turn them into burnt toast. When it says the toasts, instead of the vocals riding and dipping, that's when you want to put the automation in and then bring it up. That way the vocals stay consistent. Outlaw does it for you. Waves Vocal Writers does it for you. And then from here, what I like doing is after I have the vocals leveled, I like throwing on a compressor. That way it just compresses everything, and that way everything just stays more consistent throughout. Just because I don't want to start, personally, I don't want to EQ certain frequencies that are going to pop out more and throw the compressor off. And then from here is when I throw on a de-esser. And I recently started doing this just because I would always de-ess later on in the vocal chain, because I know that I like boosting up a lot of those highs, especially to get those crispy vocals. I started de-essing the drier vocals now, and I'm not doing too much of a de-essing. I'm doing a little de-essing, and that's just to tame some of those S's, just because when you do boost up those high frequencies, you want to have the S's and certain frequencies already tamed. So that's why I started de-essing. You don't necessarily have to de-ess first or last. It's all up to you.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close.
The reason I choose RVox is RVox is one of those plugins that you just want on your vocals. It brings your vocals to life, and it just brings those vocals right in front of you. You can use any other compressor. I just personally use RVox just because of the way that it makes the vocals sound. I like that upfront vocals, so that's why I like using RVox. So far in the vocal chain, I have Outlaw to automate the vocals, RVox to compress the vocals to bring it right up in front into your face. I have a de-esser to tame some of those S's now. So when we start EQing and compressing, the vocals are already going to sound pretty clear. Now, when it comes down to EQing your vocals, this is going to be very subjective on how much you're boosting up certain frequencies. And it all depends on the mic you're using, the room, how treated your room is, how much gain you're recording into. Just because if you have a lot of gain, you are going to be peaking and you are going to have less headroom overall to mix. So I like recording pretty low. I like recording anywhere between -12 or 18 dB. So with this EQ, I am boosting up the lows, and it's even like 0.5. I'm boosting up some of that mid, like even 0.5. I'm boosting up the high 3 dB, and I'm adding some drive.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' about my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast. I keep my mouth silent.
It already sounds a lot cleaner and it sounds a lot smoother. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. You're not gonna be able to get this sound, like this clear EQ sound, just using like a stock plugin. You're gonna have to use EQs that emulate certain hardware, and that's what's going to get that characteristic onto your vocals. So all depending on what type of rap song you're going for. So for example, if you're going for that old school hip hop sound, you might want to use certain EQs that emulate that sound. And then with this EQ, I do the shaping of the vocal. So for example, I cut out that 115, I added some compression, I boosted up that 16K 4 dBs, and then I boosted up 6K, bring out more of that presence, bring out more of that crispiness. I added some analog to add more color to the vocals. I removed some frequencies, 0.5 at around like 400, just to take out some of that boxiness.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' about my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast.
And then from here, what I do is I add a Pull Tech EQ, and this is another EQ. What I'm doing with this one is I'm boosting up that low end, I'm beefing up that 100 hertz. You want to be careful not to boost it up too much, especially if you already have a lot of low end in the person's vocal, because you start introducing mud, and that's something you don't want. So I am boosting up 12K frequencies, about 4, doing more boosting of that high end, getting that crispiness, especially with the style of song that we're going for. You want that high end on the vocals.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' about my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast. I keep my...
That already sounds good. Just with these plugins that I have on, it already sounds good. So far it's leveling, compressing, de-essing, EQ, a little bit of compression, EQ, and then this is dynamic EQ. So I'm not necessarily removing these frequencies here. What I'm doing, it's compressing those frequencies. So if you were to use a normal EQ and you remove those frequencies, those frequencies are now removed. For this, it is compressing those frequencies. So you're not necessarily removing those frequencies, you're more compressing that frequency. So if I were to solo it,
too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close.
That is what I would subtract in a normal EQ. But for using the F6 from Waves, I am compressing those frequencies. So they're still there and they still add the fullness of the vocals. But when it hits that threshold, the EQ just like compresses that frequencies. And then I am doing a little bit more boosting. This is kind of just to shape the vocals in general. You want to remove some of that low end, remove some of that boxiness, and then boost up the high end. After I EQ everything, I like compressing. The reason I EQ first and then compress is because I already have the vocals leveled, sort of compressed. So everything's leveled. I do the EQ, I do the changes, make it sound good. And then once I have the vocal shaped the way I want it, I then compress it. But the amount of compression I add isn't a lot, so the dynamics are still within the vocals. I don't like over compressing. It's all preference whether you like compressing a lot or compressing a little bit. I like using multiple compressors. Some people like using 2 compressors. Some people use 1 compressor. I use like 4, sometimes 5 compressors. I just put the distortion on soft, auto attack, and release.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' about my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast. I keep my mouth silent, don't really like to boast. If you see me, then you see me, I've been posted on them roads.
I like adding that final compressor, CLA 2. I like using this one mostly just for the color. I don't necessarily need it for the compressing. It's more for that color that's going to add to the vocals. The style of song, it's going for that old school feel. So I want to add certain compressors, certain EQs that emulate that style of music. This is one of those classic compressors that emulates one of those like big time compressors that all those big studios have. I bought this one from Waves for like 29 bucks. I have a discount code, so if you want to purchase this, you get it for like 26 bucks, which is like stupid cheap because you don't have to buy the actual hardware. You pretty much emulate it with this, which is cool. Maybe in the future, if you want to purchase hardware, purchase the hardware. If you don't have the money, you get it for a cool 26 bucks. Sounds exactly the same.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' about my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast. I keep my mouth silent, don't really like the.
It just like really smooths out the vocals and it just makes everything feel fuller. Like it feels like there's life in the vocals. You don't want your vocals to sound like dead and that, because then it's kind of like no one wants to hear a song that's like lifeless vocals. You want to make sure your vocals have like life and dynamics. And it all goes down to performance too. So I don't want to put all the job on you, because if the person's rapping and they're like, I mean, you can't really do much with, but if they're like into the song, then that's when you throw your skills and their skills, and then boom, you make a dope ass song. But the rapper's kind of like, and you're like lifeless vocals, and your song's gonna sound like ass. So you want to make sure you're choosing the right plugins and you're using the right techniques when it comes down to mixing. Once I add that final compressor, that's when I use the de-essing. That way I de-ess it. If I'm gonna use auto-tune, I put the auto-tune on at this stage. After my compression, I throw on my auto-tune towards the end, just because I don't want to EQ and compress certain frequencies that I'm not hearing. For example, with the auto-tune, it's gonna pitch the vocal. So if you're EQing certain frequencies with the auto-tune on, I feel like you're not really EQing the true sound. That's why I like throwing it on after. I feel like it works better for me. Like one of my boys, he throws auto-tune on like his second plugin or something like that. This is a de-essing. You can use any de-esser you want. I like this one just because of the way it works. After I have everything compressed, I like to de-ess it. That way frequencies that I boosted up, the high frequencies that are added from the compressors are all tamed. The last plugin is a spreader. I like using this just to widen up the vocals, just because they are full and they are right in your face, which is a dope thing, and that's something you want. But I like widening up the vocals just a little bit. You're not going to hear them like on speakers or stuff like that, but when you're hearing them on headphones, it's just going to widen up the vocals. It's not too noticeable. It's very subtle. It does add to the song. And then from here, what I like doing is once I have my vocal chain, I like busting these plugins, mostly probably because I'm lazy and I don't like throwing this on here, finding where it would fit in the chain, and then messing with this heat knob and then mix knob. It's a lot easier for me just to throw it, bust it, turn the heat all the way on, put the mix all the way on, and then just controlling it by busting it onto the vocals by doing this.
Too much bread in my pocket, I can't let a sucker close. If you playin' about my loaf, I turn them into burnt toast. I keep my mouth silent.
That sounds cool like that. Like that's a lot easier just to bust like saturation or distortion. And the cool thing about it is you can start messing with different distortions, different saturations, different preamps. And then from here, what I do is I just bust the rest. So I bust some delay, sidechain it, and then I bust my reverb. I always do the delay before the reverb. I used to do the reverb and then the delay, but then you're kind of delaying reverb, so it kind of doesn't make sense. And it kind of muddies up your track after a while. It was what I noticed. So I started delaying and then adding the reverb, and it just sounds like a lot better because you're adding the delay onto the vocals. So vocals are being delayed when in 1/4, 1/8, whatever you choose to use. And then you're adding that reverb, and it adds that space, it adds that opening, that room to the vocals that just carries the delay forward. And that's the way I like doing my vocal chain. Like I said, I'll put the link down below in the description to the full song. Now if you want to get your song mixed and mastered by me, feel free to hit me up on my Instagram or my website. Everything will be down below in the description. If you want to see me produce beats live, mix beats live, mix songs live, you can follow me on my Instagram. I am hopping on Instagram live more, just cooking up, making songs, making beats, mixing songs. So I'll put the link to my Instagram down below in the description so you guys can follow me on Instagram. Check out, join me on Instagram live while I cook up beats, just make songs. Some of the songs I use for my YouTube videos, I am mixing on Instagram live so you guys can hear them before they even drop. Now I want to remind you to subscribe and drop a like. Leave a comment telling me what your vocal chain is. I'm curious on how other people mix their vocals. So please leave some of the plugins you use on your vocal chain down below in the comments. And I hope to see you in the next video. My name's David the Crook. Peace.